All right, Heidi Easley here, and I just want to welcome you to the Artist Online Summit. And I just want to thank Sarah Beetson for being here. And if I say that wrong, I'm so sorry. But I just want to thank her for being here and taking the time out. And our whole purpose for this event is just to kind of show people how art can enrich their life, even if they're not an artist, and how we can unleash that creative person inside all of us. So, welcome, Sarah. How are you today?
I'm really good, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's lovely to be part of this.
I just love your accent.
I love yours. Mutual accent appreciation. It's
I
great.
know my Texas accent. I just love yours. So anyway, first, can you kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what you do?
Sure. So I'm an illustrator. I've that means I'm sort of, I guess, what you would call a commercial artist. So the bulk of my art practice is commissioned art. So a client will come to me and sort of with a brief or a particular project with perhaps a set idea. Sometimes it's a bit more open, and that they'll tell me exactly what they want to be drawn, and I will come along and answer that brief, and we'll sort of work together to create the perfect image or images to fit the project. So I guess, I mean, that's the main part of what I do. I do also do my own personal work as well, which I exhibit. So I'm sort of an artist and an illustrator. So I sort of have both perspectives. The illustration is really the sort of the core of my career, in effect.
Oh, okay. And you also, I know you live in Australia, right?
I do,
And you
but
go
I'm
to New
actually
York too, is that correct?
I do, yes. Yeah, so, well, I'm British. I was born in the UK, and studied and lived in the UK until my sort of mid 20s, and then I moved over to Australia. So the bulk of my year now is spent here in Queensland. This is my big studio. I live on a farm with my boyfriend and his family, but I spend quite a lot of time still back in the UK. I go home every sort of UK summer. I'm a summer person. I sort of chase summer. So I spent last year. I spent 3 months in New York doing a sort of an artist residency in Coney Island, which is one of my favourite places for inspiration. So I'm quite lucky really, because with my job I can work from home.
Mhm.
Um, and I can sort of pack all of my things that I use, all of my art materials, and I have a little scanner that just weighs 2 kilos that can go in my carry-on luggage. So I sort of have a suitcase of my art materials that comes with me everywhere I go, and I can take my practice with me. So I'm really lucky that that's kind of the way things have developed,
Mhm.
and I can build travel into my sort of creative practice.
That is so amazing. You can kind of travel there, travel back, home, or what you call your
Yeah.
home. That is such a cool life. I love
Yes.
that. And then you have that huge studio. How fun.
Yes, I'm really lucky. I mean, when I first started off, when I first moved to London, just after I finished my art degree, money was scarce, and as I was getting started, and I lived out of tiny, tiny little spaces, and I would have to have a piece of wood that would live under my bed that I would bring out, and that would become my desk because I lived in such a small space. So it's pretty luxurious now to have this huge studio space where, if I want to, I can create really big paintings and things, and it's quite a luxury. Yeah.
That's awesome. Oh, I love it. So, Sarah, how did you become an artist? Have you always been an artist, or is this something, just recently?
I think it was something that was always there with me. And I always tell people, I think it started because as a child, my grandmother had a pub, a bar.
Hmm.
So, and my mum had worked there. And when we were small, we spent a lot of time there, my brother and I. And so, because we would have to be well behaved, my parents would just leave us at a little table in the corner with a pile of magic markers and, a colouring in book, and that's
Hmm.
what we would do with our weekends. And my brother traded as a graphic designer, so it kind of
Oh,
followed through
really?
our lives. Yeah, it was just so it was really it was something that wasn't really particularly encouraged. It was just an incidental thing to keep us occupied. But so, and I always enjoyed it. Yeah, my dad actually told me recently that he still has in his office a pencil drawing that I did in 1989. So I would have been 8 years old, of a
Oh.
really realistic Coca Cola can. And he said he just was so impressed that he's kept it all these years and it was framed. So I was just like, wow, that's really lovely. So it's something that I did totally do from childhood and always loved to do. And I studied art all the way through school, and then when I got to university level, it took me a long time to decide exactly what branch of art that I wanted to follow. But the key thing that I've always loved most is probably drawing. So I decided to take a degree in illustration, which was fantastic. And I went off to study in Falmouth in Cornwall, which is in the west of England, and sort of an 8-hour train journey from home. So it was really good sort of lesson becoming really independent at quite a young age.
Yeah.
I had a lot of foreign students around me who really inspired me. So it gave me a taste of life outside of England. And then I moved over to London, and I started off working because when I graduated, I think I'd sort of been led to believe that you could get these great jobs as illustrators working in a magazine and drawing cartoons or, doing a daily piece. And I think by sort of 2002, those positions weren't really around anymore. That was something of the past, and everyone was freelancing. And of course, to build a freelance client roster, you've really got to start from scratch. And it took a while to get that together. So I started working in the fashion industry, and I worked doing fabric print and research and things, and a little bit of styling. And I worked for quite a few big names in London. I was really lucky. I worked for Stella McCartney, and I worked for, that was amazing. That was print design. And I worked for a company called Yellow Door, who are their boss is quite well known in the UK. Her name's Mary Portis, and she does amazing window design, and does all the kind of storefronts for Harvey Nichols and Harrods and all the big shops like that. So that was a great experience. And then I was really lucky after that to find 2 agents, one in Canada and one in the UK, to represent me. And then I started to get a flow of work. And as I went on, my London agent offered me a position as a talent scout, looking for other artists to join them. So I do that from home 3 days a week as well, which is wonderful because that gives me a little bit of a bread and butter salary to sort of flesh out around my own artistic commissions. So that's wonderful because I make 100% of my income from illustration, some of it from the more business side and some of it from the actual creative side. So I'm really very lucky indeed, I think.
Well, and that's so cool too, because you can almost kind of mentor some of those people coming up too.
Yeah, it's wonderful to get an opportunity to really sort of liaise with artists at the beginnings of their career, just when it's all starting to happen, and it's a really exciting time. And it's inspiring for me as well to see what younger artists are doing and what's coming through, and I'm really very engaged with the industry as a whole, which I'm really lucky to have also.
Yeah. That's really cool. So, Sarah, I know you already kind of answered your favorite thing to do in the art world, which I'm guessing is the illustrating, the drawing. Is that correct?
I mean, I would say I have a really good marriage between commissioned illustration, where I have a brief to work to, and then doing my own personal work. And it's always a real kind of, sometimes I would say I really love to do my own things where I can do whatever I want, and I really get to do things from my heart. But at the same time, sometimes I really love to work with a deadline. So I have a set amount of time that I've got to create something, and I love to work with the client and transform their ideas into my work. So I suppose my 2 favourite things are commissioned illustration and personal work, because you get the best of both worlds. Yeah.
Right. Do you find, and I know this isn't a question we went over, but do you find it's hard sometimes to make time for your own artwork versus the stuff that you have to do for a job?
Yes and no. I mean, really, there's a natural sort of ebb and flow with commission work. So sometimes I'll be doing 2 or 3 things at once, and it's really hectic, and then there's definitely no time for any personal work. But other times I have little gaps in between things, and then I can really, have some time to create personal work. So I usually have something ongoing. Like at the moment, I have my Coney Island project, which came from my residency last year. So I'm still I'm working on things in my spare time in between things, and then when a job comes in, that sort of gets pushed over to the other side of the studio while I work on the job. So it kind of, they naturally sort of flow into one another, I suppose. Yeah.
Right. Okay. That's good to know. Yeah. Sometimes that's my struggle. I'll be working on stuff that I'm trying to get ready for an event or something I'm trying to sell. And then I still want to do my own personal artwork. So it's been kind of a challenge for me. So I'm trying to figure out that balance.
It's really hard, isn't it? And I think the thing for me that has taken me quite a long time to achieve, particularly when I was living in London and, it was quite a hectic pace of life, and just living in a city, there's so many great distractions.
Yeah.
And I think the best thing about moving here is it's just allowed me to fully immerse in my work. And I would say 9 times out of 10, I draw a little bit every day now, at least
Oh.
3 out of 5 days a week, sort of thing. So I'm really lucky to have achieved that. But I've done that by sort of removing myself a bit and coming to the peace and quiet and being sort of a classic artist as the hermit away in the studio. And then when I need to get that city influence, I go off to London or New York or Melbourne or wherever it may be, and that's when I take all of that in. So I've got a good balance, really. I'm lucky.
That's so cool. Yeah, I talked to some artists a couple weeks ago, and two of the artists actually talked about like they got up at like 3:30 in the morning to work on their art, and I was like, I don't think I'm there yet.
Oh no, I think I went through a stage where. I guess in my 20s, I was taking on every single project and every exhibition offer and trying to do everything. And it really exhausted me. And I would be doing stuff like I'd have a brief come in from Toronto or New York, and I'd switch totally to American time, which, as you know from us scheduling these meetings, is almost totally back to front.
Right.
So I would then work all the way through my night into the early hours of the morning. And then I'd have a bit of a nap. And then I'd sort of wake up and try and get my day back together at the normal time. And it didn't always work. And I'd become a bit of a night owl. And I don't think it was necessarily, at that time it worked. But now I'm in my 30s, I'm a bit less. I still do those jobs, but I'll take time out the next day to recuperate. And I won't push myself quite so hard. And I think you need to have a good life-work balance, and I think there's a point when, but maybe if you do wake up at 3:30 in the morning to create, that's great, but perhaps you go to bed at 8 p.m. to make up for that, and that's the way it works for you. I know myself, I do love quiet time, and I think when I was sharing a house with other artists or living with more people, I did work better at night as well, because it's that undisturbed peace where nobody's going to interrupt you and you can just create without any distractions. But I think here, because I have a separate studio, and this is the first time I've had that from the last few years, I have a creative space where I can shut off from the rest of the world. So I can work more normal hours because I don't have to avoid the distractions, I suppose. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's understandable. So do you have a favorite book or a favorite quote you want to share with our viewers?
I do. I have a few. Probably my favourite area of literature is sort of 60s American literature. Like I love Truman Capote, and I really love a writer called Richard Brautigan. I don't know if you've heard of him. I think he's a bit less known, more sort of the end of the beat era, beginning of the sort of 60s San Francisco kind of slightly hippie era. And his work is just so endearing and childlike and innocent and beautiful, and there's a book of his called In Watermelon Sugar that I just love. It's almost like a little child describing the world through their eyes, and it doesn't always make sense, but it really conjures up a lot of colours and sort of images of fruit and food and things, and I love that book. I've read that several times. And then another book that I totally love, because I think since I moved to a farm, I've rediscovered my affinity with animals. I have pet chickens and cows, and there's beautiful tropical birds around. There's a wallaby, like a little kangaroo, that comes around and hangs out in my studio. And I was actually thinking around this morning, I was like, he might just hop in while we're doing this interview.
That would be amazing. Send him in.
But there's another book that I really love, is called FUP, F-U-P, and it's by Jim Dodge, and it's about a granddad and his grandson and a duck that comes to live with them, who's just totally human and just the most amazing character. And it's one of those things that you would read, in one sitting possibly. It's not long, and it's kind of tragic but beautiful and sweet, and just kind of sums up man's relationship with animals, and it's just lovely. So I'd say that's my favourite. And in terms of a quote, it's always really hard, and there's a few, and I would say I'm always fairly inspired by songs and films and things that have to do with dreams, because I think as an artist, to really motivate yourself on a day-to-day basis, often you have to look to that being, you know, the dream of doing that. So anything that inspires like that, like as a child, I loved the song from The Sound of Music, Climb Every Mountain, because it talks about working to find your dream. And so, the one quote that it's so sad that it's kind of been copyrighted and associated with such a big brand, but it always motivates me, is the Nike slogan, "Just do it." Because I find so many people kind of dream of doing something more creative, or maybe one day I'll do this, or one day I'll set that up, and one day just goes on and on and on and never comes. Right. And I do think "just do it" is like just try and build it into your life, and maybe do it in your spare time and indulge in it, and actually do it, and you'll get there, sort of thing. So I do think that's a great quote.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think that "just do it" would solve so many people's problems sometimes.
So
just
much.
do it, people. Just stop talking about it and do it.
Totally. I agree.
Well, that's good though, because a lot of people that are going to be watching this interview series, this interview, is, or people that have, are interested in art, maybe they've done a little, maybe they've only drawn a little bit when they were younger. I have a lot of my customers, they haven't drawn since elementary school or painted. And then they take a class and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm in love with this. And so I just, I think it's just so important that people know that just do it, just try it. If you're interested, just try it.
And I think art is so therapeutic, and I think if you can get past try and get past getting to create a masterpiece straight away, and enjoy the process a little bit more, and not worry too much about what's happening, and really sort of give in to that, I think you get more out of it. I recently did an exhibition down in Melbourne, and I was asked to do a masterclass at this exhibition, and I had 35 people actually came and booked in. So I had this huge class of people, and I did which we're going to come on to, and I'm probably going to semi-answer one of your other questions when I say this, but I did a blind contour drawing class, basically. And some of the people that came were quite young, and I imagine still in high school. Some of them were other artists that would be doing similar things to me, I guess, and some of them had no experience whatsoever and were potentially just interested in art. Right. And it's something that works for small children right the way up to the master illustrators. And you kind of really you get the most out of it if you really give in and go, I'm not creating a great drawing here. I'm gonna do the exercise and see what happens. And so part of the technique is basically, you've got your subject, perhaps your person sitting next to you that you're going to draw, and you get your pad of paper and you pick up your pen and you go, okay, what part am I going to start drawing? Perhaps you choose an eye. So you place your pen on the paper at the point where maybe the eye would be, so maybe towards the top of the paper. And then you're not allowed to look at your paper for the next few minutes. But you draw in sort of almost a continuous line. And if you keep your pen on the paper, you can kind of work out what sort of, if you're down low or if you're up high, and where everything goes. And then when you finally finish and you look back at your drawing, you'll find that there's squiggles and lines and kind of abstract mess, but in the middle of it is some perfectly drawn fingers or an ear or whatever. And I think one of the mistakes we make as artists is we try to recreate. We look at our subject and then we try to recreate it based on a memory. And I think if we're actually really looking, we kind of get more out of it in a way. You sort of submit to it, your brain and your eyes understand, and you don't need to sort of almost take a photo and then move and then try and replicate it. So it was wonderful, because I think some of the best results were people who'd never drawn before, and they were just so happy, and it really stripped away all of those preconceptions that they had about how you're supposed to go about drawing. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you said that too, about the process, because that's so true. Like, just the process of creating sometimes is what you need, not necessarily the finished product.
Oh yeah, definitely. And just I sometimes find, because the drawing part of the way I create work is probably, I wouldn't say stressful, but that's the only part that has to be really, really perfect. And once all my lines are drawn and set in stone, and I've got the sort of the backbone down, the most fun part for me is the painting, because I can spend hours just adding colours, and that's really relaxing and therapeutic, because the bulk of the work is done. The most important part of the composition is set,
Right.
and the painting itself is just. I think that's mainly why I've always followed it all of my life, because it's just therapy. It's just, it's a zone that's just completely relaxed and a really happy place to be.
Yeah, that's how I feel about painting too. I love it. It's my happy place.
Yeah.
So we talked about the blind contour drawing, and how, I know you talked about how it helped other people's art experience, but how has the blind contour drawing and the free drawing kind of helped your art experience?
Well, when I first started doing it, I was at art school, and I was in my second year of 3 years, and I felt like I was using all these different techniques that were really separate. So I was doing really detailed drawings, like I described before, with pencil, really kind of realistic drawings, and then I was using gouache to do other things, and then I had all these different materials, but none of them fitted. And we used to have a full day of life drawing once a week. And I had a wonderful life drawing teacher who taught me this blind contour drawing technique, and I suddenly realised that I could put together all of these different materials that I'd been using, and I could actually use them all. I didn't have to omit one and decide on one. I could pull them all together, and the line was what, for me, tied it all together. So I started mainly doing blind drawing, and you can see from my earlier works how my style went from sort of maybe a little bit of it's blind and a little bit looking, to getting that confidence to really understand and draw freehand. So yeah, the more I've gone along, I think, and the more I draw, the more confident I get, and the more I feel you start to understand proportions of things, and it just starts to come naturally. I guess it's like swimming or riding a bike or anything like that. It's a fitness thing almost, and the more that you do it, the more fit you are, and I think it's the same with drawing. So
yeah, and I think too, like, I know one of my college professors one time told me, he's like, drawing especially, it's like, you never have to have drawn before in your life, and you can learn to draw. Sometimes I feel like with singers, you can't, like, I don't have a voice and I never will be able to sing, but with drawing, you can teach yourself no matter who you are, I believe.
I think so, absolutely. I think anyone can get into shape and get fit. So I think anyone can draw, and I often say that to people, and they sort of go, "Oh no, I couldn't draw. I have no artistic talent." And I'm like, "Well, I really think that you can. It's sort of, a lot of it is shedding those preconceptions, and it's a hard thing to do." Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah. And do you believe anyone can use art to enrich their life?
Yes, absolutely. I do think, as I said, I think art is so therapeutic, and building it into your life, I think, is almost like building in meditation or yoga or fitness, and it's just it's a great facet for anybody to really, it's a string to anyone's belt, I guess.
Yeah, that's good. And Sarah, do you have any advice for someone that maybe has never done art before but wants to try? How would you advise them to start?
I think, I when I was down at this the exhibition in Melbourne recently, I spoke to a fellow artist who really just put a great idea in my mind about why people do art and why people stop and forget about it. And it's that when we're children and we're in primary school or elementary school, we're all given a pack of crayons to express ourselves and to draw, and to, we're really encouraged to do art and to be part of it. And there's no real expectation placed on that, because you're just a child drawing. And then when you get to high school, the pack of pens gets taken off you, and you're thrown all these textbooks and computers, and you're sort of discouraged, apart from in your art classes, from being so creative. And I think most people, unless they have a real affinity with it and they've been told as a child that they're great at art, great at drawing, I think most people just put it away and go, that's not something that I can do. So I think I would suggest go back to primary school and remember what it was you liked doing. Perhaps it was making plasticine models or working with clay or building things out of wood blocks or whatever it was creative, and start to think about going back and just picking up where you left off. And I would suggest, I think a great thing when you're starting out is life drawing. It can be overwhelming, it can be hard, but it's a great way. Or even doing sort of a still life class. And I don't think you need to even think about going and paying to do these things. I know that, I'm not sure about in the US, but I know in Sydney and in Australia, local bars will do a night where there's a life drawing class, and they'll have a few models will come in, and you can sort of buy a drink and bring your own sketchbook, and it's very informal, and
That's
you
cool.
can just have a go at drawing, and it becomes sort of a night out and a fun thing for friends to do together. So I would definitely recommend, and I think life drawing is probably the hardest place to start, because I think drawing human figures is really overwhelming and really hard to get right. So perhaps if you're going to start drawing, start with something simple, maybe start with a still life, something easier to replicate. One thing that I would also say is, I know a lot of people, because I always work from reference. I never draw out of my head. I always like to know exactly what I'm doing and have all that information to hand. And I recently I went to an exhibition by an amazing Australian comic book artist named Sean Tan. And I was really delighted to hear that he works entirely from reference as well. So if he's got, in one of his books, if he's got children, he'll find some neighbours or some friends who have children the right age and photograph them first, and then make sure that he understands how they move around. And I've always done that as well. I will, if I have a project coming up in this time, I'll tend to do a bit of a photo shoot where I'll get someone to pose for me so the hands are in the right position. And a lot of people, I think, have a preconceived notion that that's cheating, but I think you're taking something and creating something else, and I think all the information you have to hand, the better. So I would suggest definitely finding something that you like, taking some photos and using those as your start point, your reference to draw from, because there's nothing more scary than a blank page and a pen and not having any idea of what you're going to draw. So to give yourself that bit of an idea and a starting point, and it'll be easier, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the references, not only does it help to have a reference, but it helps just for inspiration. You know, you see other people's art and it inspires you.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So do you have a free gift you'd like to offer our viewers today? And if you do, I can attach a link so that way everyone can go get it and kind of see what you have to offer. So do you want to talk a minute about that?
Sure. So last year, as we touched on already, I went to New York and I did an artist residency in Coney Island, and I did that. There was no such residency program for what I wanted to do, so I used crowdfunding to source the money, and I did it completely by myself. I found an artist loft in Brooklyn to stay in, and I went down to Coney Island every day, and I always took with me a sketchbook.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I'm going to have to talk to you later about that so I can get some notes.
Yeah, absolutely. It was one of those things that, one of those dreams that I'd had for years, that I suddenly stopped and went, I need to stop dreaming about this and actually do it.
Just do it. Your quote.
Exactly. I was like, I need to put this into practice. And you know, with crowdfunding now, it was so much easier to achieve. It was fantastic. But every day I went down there, I'd take my Polaroid camera and I'd take my my proper camera, and I would take my sketchbook with just a few pens. And because that's something that I haven't done a lot of in recent years, especially, you know, as things get busy, you don't get a chance to go out and sketch people on the subway, or, you know, sketch people in a cafe or whatever. So I really wanted to make that part of my residency. So I had this beautiful old book, which was it actually belonged to my mother-in-law. And it was a ledger, a farm ledger that has milk and eggs and things, so they can write what they've produced every day. It was from the 60s, I think. So it wasn't a blank page, which is lovely as well, because you've got lines to work on. You're not sort of going, white page, what do I draw? So I took that down with me and my pens, and I did all of these drawings, all these line drawings, but I never finished them because it was essentially a sketchbook. So I decided that I would send my sketchbook out there as a colouring in book, which I launched recently. So I am going to give you guys a page from my colouring in book that you can colour in and work with.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, and I'll make sure to attach the link for it so that way when they, get the email, they can go straight to it. So that's awesome. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. No problem at
Do you,
all.
do you have any last thoughts for our viewers?
Um, Really, I'd just love to encourage everybody to get into art. I think it's even if your life is not at all what you would consider artistic. I think it's something you can build in like exercise, and it'll only become a really enriching part of your life. So, and don't be scared, and have a go, and you don't have to show anyone your work until you're happy. But yeah, just best of luck to everyone, and enjoy it. It's a really exciting time, I think.
It is, yeah. Well, thank you, Sarah. You are so inspiring and so amazing. And I just want to thank you for being a part of this. And I just know that people are going to get a lot from it. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much, Heidi. It's been great fun for me too.
All right, I'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.